My name is Arden Vale, 24 years old. The slap landed before the soup cooled. A sharp bloom, left cheek, the kind of pain that makes the room tilt. Dad's ring scraped skin, and something small in me broke again, tidy as a twig. Across the table, Mom stirred with the steady wrist of a hostess, tasted, and said, "Salt matters," like she was critiquing a recipe and not my existence. I stared at the bowl. Steam curled up and disappeared like it knew better than to linger in this house. "Tomorrow at noon we have guests," Dad said, wiping his hand on a linen napkin. His breath carried last night's whiskey and this morning's certainty. "You will cover that bruise and smile. If you embarrass me." "I won't," I said, because the script requires the understudy to promise she won't forget her lines. He left the table, tie already knotted, confidence buttoned. When his office door closed on the other end of the day, he would walk into his boss's room as if doors only ever opened for him. They usually did. He believed in rules because he wrote them. At dawn, I stood in the bathroom mirror with cheap concealer and a shaking hand, layering beige over red until the skin looked like a lie I could live with. The light was unkind. I thought about the ad agency in Columbus, downsized 6 months ago, the cardboard box of desk plants, and framed quotes that suddenly meant nothing. Coming back to Mansfield was supposed to be a bridge. It became a cage with nice drapes. In the kitchen, eggs hissed in the pan. The house had its own soundtrack. The grandfather clock's dignified tick, the HVAC's polite sigh, Mom's slippers skimming tile like apologies. She floated in with perfume that arrived before she did and said, "Arden, change the runner on the table. Linda hates that pattern." "I'll change it," I murmured. "And put ice in the crystal. Edward wants the scotch to look like we entertain." We entertained illusions, that we were a family, not a brand, that my $50 weekly allowance was generosity, not control, that my bank account needing Dad's approval was protection, not a choke chain. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I answered because hope is rude and shows up uninvited. "This is Arden." "Ms. Vale, this is Stephen Hayes. I manage your grandfather's trust." Calm voice, precise. "We need to meet today." My grip tightened. "Why?" "There are irregularities, significant withdrawals tied to your name. It's serious." The pan hissed louder. "I can come this afternoon." "Please do," he said. "And Arden, don't discuss this with anyone until we've spoken." We hung up. My pulse kept talking. Across the counter, Mom's eyes flicked up from polishing silver. "Who was that?" "A recruiter," I said, and swallowed the guilt that always comes with lying to the person who trained you to do it well. She nodded, already rearranging peonies. "Wear the pearl studs. They soften you." At 11:30, there was nothing left to adjust. The dining room was staged like a magazine spread, china rimmed in gold, napkins folded with angles so crisp they could cut a finger, a centerpiece that smelled like money pretending to be flowers. Outside the front window, Mrs. Brooks from next door clipped her roses the way she always did, snipping and glancing, snipping and glancing. Ellen had eyes like porch lights, soft, steady, always on. At night, the tiny red LED on her camera blinked at our driveway. "Raccoons," she'd said once, smiling. "They get into everything." The doorbell rang. I opened it to two of Mom's orbiters, Linda Carter, lacquered and laughing, Susan Gray, all compliments, and Jonathan Price, who did not belong to their world at all. College came back with him. Late-night study sessions, coffee that tasted like ambition, his habit of noticing what other people ignored. "Arden." He smiled and then didn't. His gaze caught on my face, held. "It's been a minute." "Welcome," I said, and practiced my mother's version of a smile, the one that doesn't move your eyes. We seated them. Mom became a wind-up hostess. "So glad you could come, Linda. And Susan, your dress. And Arden, darling, the iced tea." Dad arrived with the weather of himself, commanding, already annoyed. "Pour, Arden," he said, not looking. And I poured, hands steady over crystal that remembered better hands. Jonathan leaned toward me, while the women compared bridge results like battle scars. "You okay?" he asked under the hum. He kept his voice low, steadying. "I'm fine," I said, the syllables brittle. "You're not," he said, and it wasn't accusation, just a fact placed gently on the table between us. Dad's voice boomed from the head. "Wine." I circled, filled, retreated. When I reached Jonathan again, he lifted a napkin like he was inspecting the hem and said, barely moving his lips, Meet me at the park after this. Same bench we used to cram for econ. I nodded once. Saying yes out loud would make it real, and real things get punished here. Lunch was a performance of normal. Dad telling a story about a client as if he personally invented commerce, Mom laughing on cue, Linda and Susan offering the kind of praise that evaporates when bills arrive. Jonathan did polite, he always could, but his jaw tightened when Dad snapped, "Faster, Arden," and his eyes went dark when Mom said, "Do try to be graceful, like grace was something you borrowed from people who had it." By 2, plates were scraped and compliments given. The door closed on their perfume and their practiced kindness. Mom started collecting place cards. Dad checked his phone, declaring he had calls. I slid my purse strap over my shoulder. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, controlling her voice the way she controlled centerpieces. "Errands," I said. "Runner for the hall. The other one's wrong for fall." She considered the alibi as if it were an arrangement. "Don't be long." "I won't." Outside, sunlight made everything look less true. I walked past Ellen's hedge. She looked up, secateurs poised. "Arden," she said with that gentle, inspecting tone. "You'll tell me if you need anything, won't you?" "I will," I said, and meant it for the first time. At the park, the swings creaked, and a father pushed a toddler with the patience of a saint. Jonathan was already on the old study bench, elbows on knees, eyes on the duck pond like the water might answer him. "You didn't have that bruise last time I saw you," he said, no preamble. "I have concealer," I said. "That's not an answer." "I know." We sat with the honest things between us until I could breathe. I told him small pieces, downsizing, Dad's rules, Mom's audits of my face and finances. Not everything, not yet. He listened like he always had, without trying to fix the ending before he understood the beginning. "I got a call," I said, "from the trust manager, Stephen Hayes. There are irregularities with my grandfather's fund, withdrawals tied to my name." He went very still. "Does your dad have access?" "As co-trustee." The word tasted like metal. "Stephen wants to meet today." "Then we go today," Jonathan said, like it was that simple. Like my fear didn't have roots under the house. I thought about Dad's threats, about Mom's eyes when she thinks optics are slipping. I thought about how quietly a person can erase another person if no one is watching. Then I thought about Ellen's tiny red camera light and how it never blinked unless it saw movement. "Okay," I said, "after this." He exhaled, something uncoiling. "Text me the address. I'll meet you there." We stood. He didn't touch me, and somehow that steadied me more than if he had. On the way back home, I practiced telling myself the thing I'd never been allowed to say out loud. I am not the problem they tell me I am. At the porch, Mom was rearranging a vase that did not need rearranging. Dad's car was gone. Storms leave like that, too, sudden and sure they were right. Across the street, Ellen waved with 2 fingers and went back to her roses, the camera LED winking like a secret that wasn't mine to keep. At 3:15, I grabbed my keys. "Errand," I said to the house. "Salt," Mom said to the air, as if seasoning could fix what was broken. "Got it," I said, and stepped into the bright afternoon toward a strip mall office with fluorescent lights and maybe the first truth that would not be allowed to disappear. Stephen Hayes's office was wedged between a nail salon and a tax service, 2 places where people tried to make damage look respectable. Inside, the air smelled faintly of toner and stress. A fake fern sat in the corner under a humming fluorescent light. Stephen himself looked like an accountant carved from caution. Pressed shirt, silver tie, glasses that caught the glare when he leaned forward. "Arden, thank you for coming," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. His voice was kind, but it carried the weight of someone who'd already seen too many families unravel over numbers. I sat clutching my bag. "You said there were irregularities." He slid a folder across the desk. "I wish I could say it's minor, but these withdrawals," he tapped the paper with a fountain pen, "add up to $75,000. They're signed under your name." My stomach twisted. "That's impossible." "I know. That's why I called." He opened the ledger, pointing to the electronic signature lines. "These were authorized through the co-trustee account, your father's login credentials. Technically, he had access. But this," he tapped again, "this is fraud." My pulse thudded in my ears. "What happens if I don't do anything?" "You could be held liable. The withdrawals were routed through your account. You'll need to file a complaint to protect yourself." The words landed like stones. File a complaint. Against Edward Dunn, the man who built his reputation on being Mansfield's honorable businessman. The man who taught me fear came with a price tag. Stephen's tone softened. Arden, I've handled trust violations before. Families always say the same thing. It's complicated. But if you let this slide, he'll keep control of your inheritance. And worse, your name will be on the record when the audit hits. You need to separate yourself legally. I nodded slowly, fingers gripping the folder. I'll think about it. He exhaled, like he already knew how hard thinking about it would be. If you need advice, I can connect you with someone who's discreet. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under the afternoon heat. My phone buzzed. Jonathan? Jonathan, did you meet him? Me. Yes, it's bad. Jonathan, tell me where you are. 15 minutes later, his car pulled up beside me. I climbed in, clutching the file like it was radioactive. He glanced at it. Want to tell me? My dad's been stealing from my grandfather's trust, I said flatly. $75,000 in my name. Jonathan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You're kidding. I wish. He drove aimlessly for a while, down quiet streets lined with sycamores, before pulling over by the lake. What will you do? I don't know. The words came out small. If I press charges, I'll destroy what's left of my family. If I don't, he destroys me. Jonathan turned to me. Arden, he already destroyed the idea of family. You're just trying to survive the fallout. I looked at the water. A duck drifted lazily, unaware of how easy its freedom was. I need proof before I do anything. He nodded. Then let's find proof. His certainty felt like oxygen. That night, I came home to find Mom polishing the silver again. It gleamed like a weapon. Where have you been? She asked without looking up. Errands. Her tone sharpened. Errands that take 4 hours? I forced a smile. Traffic. She studied me, her reflection fractured in the silver tray. Your father works too hard for you to play the martyr, Arden. I'm not playing anything. Her eyes flicked up, cold as glass. Then stop acting like a victim. Something inside me cracked, not loud enough for her to hear, but enough for me to feel. I walked upstairs without another word. In my room, I opened the folder again. Every number glared like an accusation. My grandfather had trusted Edward to manage the fund meant for my future. Grad school, maybe a small business someday. Dad had turned it into a personal slush account. Footsteps creaked in the hall. I shoved the folder under my pillow as the door opened. Edward stood there, tie loosened, face flushed with bourbon confidence. Why were you in town this afternoon? My throat went dry. Just out. He leaned against this frame, eyes narrowing. You didn't go talking to anyone about family matters, did you? No. He smiled without warmth. Good. Remember, you owe us. You live here because we let you. The door closed. I didn't move for a long time. Later, while scrolling aimlessly on my phone to quiet my thoughts, I saw the tiny porch light blinking outside Ellen Brooks's house. Always steady, always watching. I texted her before I could overthink it. Me. You home? Ellen. Always. Everything okay? Me. Not really. Can we talk tomorrow? Ellen. My door's open, sweetheart, anytime. The next morning, I crossed the yard before sunrise. Ellen greeted me with coffee and the kind of calm that makes you want to cry. I know you've been trying to hold it together, she said, sliding a small digital recorder across the table. But you need to hear this. She pressed play. Through faint static came my parents' voices, arguing, sharp and venomous. Edward, if Arden finds out about the $75,000, we're finished. Barbara, she won't. She's too scared to look. I froze. The sound of their certainty was worse than the slap. Ellen watched me, eyes kind but firm. I keep my porch camera on all night. It picked up a few things you might need. Yelling, shoving. I didn't mean to pry, but I think it's time someone had your back. I covered my mouth, the recorder still playing faint echoes of my parents' betrayal. Ellen, why would you help me? Because no one helped me once, she said quietly, and I promised myself I'd never stay silent again. I stared at the blinking red light on her recorder, realizing it matched the one outside her porch, the same steady flash I'd seen every night. She hadn't been watching raccoons. She'd been watching me. You need to take this to someone who can make noise, she said. A journalist. I know a man named Richard Moore. He's been digging into local corruption cases. He'll listen. I looked at the recorder again. Proof had a sound, and it was louder than fear. The coffee shop smelled like roasted beans and second chances. I sat by the window, the recorder and Stephen's documents spread between two mugs. Jonathan was across from me, jacket off, sleeves rolled. Beside him sat Richard Moore, the reporter Ellen had called. Mid-40s, notebook in hand, eyes that scanned everything twice. He leaned forward. "You're sure you want to do this, Arden?" I nodded, though my hands trembled around my cup. I'm done pretending this isn't happening. Richard's pen clicked. "Good. I'll verify everything, but we'll hold the story until after you've filed charges. Keeps you safe, keeps the case clean. Once there's a verdict, we go public. That's when it really hits." Jonathan's hand brushed mine under the table. Grounding, not possessive. "She's not alone," he said. Richard gave a faint smile. "Then she's luckier than most." He flipped through the folder Stephen had given me. Dates, signatures, routing numbers, all point to Edward Dunn. The audio from Ellen seals intent. It's airtight. I stared out the window, watching people hurry through their lives like nothing could collapse between breakfast and lunch. "My mom's part of it too," I said quietly. "Maybe not the money, but she looked the other way. That's how it's always been." Richard jotted a note. "Moral accomplice. We'll handle that carefully." He gathered the papers, his expression professional but not cold. "File first. I'll keep the evidence secure. Once you sign, Edward's power to intimidate you starts to crumble." "Crumble," I echoed. The word felt dangerous and freeing. When Richard left, Jonathan stayed. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I think I'm getting close." He gave me that half smile I remembered from college, the one that appeared when he thought I was braver than I knew. "Then let's finish this." By the time I got home, dusk had turned the house into a silhouette. The porch light was on, waiting like a warning. Mom sat in the living room, pearls on, glass of wine in hand, pretending it wasn't her third. "Your father wants to speak with you," she said, not looking up from her magazine. "Of course he does," I murmured, stepping inside. Edward was in the kitchen. A legal document sat on the counter between us, face up like bait. "Sign this," he said. His voice was flat, a tone I'd learned meant danger. I scanned it. A waiver claiming the $75,000 was a family loan voluntarily given. A lie in ink. "What is this?" I asked. "An end to this nonsense." He crossed his arms. "You clear it up, we move on. No one needs to know anything." My pulse jumped. "No." His jaw twitched. "What did you say?" I said no. He stepped closer, voice dropping low. "You ungrateful little girl. After everything we've done for you." I thought of the bruise, the empty accounts, the nights spent apologizing for existing. "You didn't do it for me," I said. "You did it to control me." For the first time, I saw something flicker behind his anger. Not remorse, but fear. "Go to your room before you regret this," he snapped. But I didn't. I turned and walked out the front door. The screen slammed behind me like punctuation. Ellen met me at her door with a blanket and a flashlight like she'd been waiting. "Guest room's ready," she said. "You're not sleeping there tonight." I wanted to protest, say I didn't want to impose, but the words dissolved. My hands shook too much to hold them. She guided me inside, poured tea, and let me sit in silence until the shaking stopped. "You did the right thing," she said finally. "I just made everything worse." "No," she said, setting the mug down gently. "You made it real. That's what abusers hate most. Reality." The house smelled like cinnamon and old books, the kind of safety I'd forgotten existed. From the window, I could see my parents' house across the lawn, lights blazing, curtains drawn. For once, I wasn't inside that glow. I was free of it. My phone buzzed. "Jonathan. Jonathan. Where are you?" "Me. Ellen's. I left." "Jonathan. Proud of you. Stay there. I'll check in the morning." I typed back a simple "thank you," then deleted it before sending. Gratitude felt too fragile to survive the night. Ellen appeared with a small USB stick. "The porch cam," she said. "Everything it caught the past 3 months. If he tries to deny anything, this will shut him up." I took it carefully, as if it could break under truth's weight. "Get some rest, sweetheart," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "Tomorrow we go to the courthouse." When she turned off the light, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sounds of her old house creaking gently like reassurance. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of morning. But I was ready for it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and coffee. Nervous, ordinary, human. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Jonathan behind me, his hand a silent anchor on my shoulder. Ellen was beside him, a fortress in a floral blouse. Across the aisle sat my parents. Edward looked smaller without his confidence, paler, his jaw unshaven. But his eyes still had that command in them, the same one that could silence a room. Barbara, dressed in muted gray, sat upright, but distant, as though she'd rather be anywhere else. When the clerk called Dunn v. Dunn, the room stilled. The judge's voice was firm but not unkind. Ms. Vale, you're alleging that your father unlawfully withdrew $75,000 from your grandfather's trust using your name as cover. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. My voice didn't shake. I wasn't sure how I managed that. The prosecutor began by showing the ledger Stephen Hayes had authenticated, followed by the audit trail linking Edward's credentials to the transactions. Mr. Dunn had co-trustee access, the prosecutor said, but these transfers occurred without Ms. Vale's authorization and were hidden using falsified digital signatures. Edward's lawyer, a slick man in a navy suit, rose. My client maintains that the funds were part of a family loan. There was no criminal intent, merely a misunderstanding between relatives. I almost laughed. Misunderstanding. As if abuse could be recast as miscommunication. Then they played Ellen's audio recording. Through the tinny speaker, my father's voice filled the courtroom. If Arden finds out about the $75,000, we're done. Then Barbara's reply, colder than I remembered. She won't. She's too scared to look. A few people in the gallery murmured. Jonathan's hand tightened on my shoulder, a subtle reminder. You're here. You're doing it. The defense objected, something about privacy, wiretapping, irrelevant context, but the judge overruled. Continue, she said. Ellen's video footage came next. The porch camera, time-stamped, grainy. Edward grabbing my arm, shoving me back toward the door. My voice muffled, pleading for space. Mom watching through the window. Barbara looked away as it played. Edward clenched his jaw so tight a vein rose in his temple. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Dunn, do you wish to respond to this? Edward's voice cracked around its own arrogance. That's a family matter. You people don't understand how we handle discipline. Enough, the judge cut in. This court does not consider assault a family matter. His words hit the air like a gavel before the actual gavel did. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. My palms were slick, but my spine was steel. My father always said he was protecting me, I said. He said control was care, that obedience was love. I believed it because I needed to, but taking my money, using my name, hitting me when I didn't smile right, that's not love. It's theft with good manners. The courtroom was silent, except for the clicking of a stenographer's keys. Barbara shifted, her pearl bracelet trembling. Arden, she whispered, just loud enough. Stop. I turned to her, meeting her eyes for the first time in years. You could have stopped him years ago, I said. You just didn't. Her lips pressed together. Tears welled, but they stayed there, suspended, never falling. The prosecutor rested his case. The defense tried to salvage dignity by calling Edward to the stand, but every answer only tightened the noose. When asked about the missing funds, he said, I was securing the family's future. By forging your daughter's signature? He hesitated. It's complicated. The prosecutor's tone sharpened. Then simplify it for us. He couldn't. After lunch recess, I sat outside on the courthouse steps. The sky was a flat gray, heavy but dry. Jonathan handed me a paper cup of tea. You were brilliant, he said quietly. I didn't feel brilliant. I felt like I was bleeding in public. That's what truth feels like sometimes. Ellen joined us, leaning on the railing. He's unraveling, she said. You saw it. He's not used to being questioned. I stared at the courthouse doors. Neither is Mom. Ellen sighed. Barbara's built her life on keeping things pretty. You just handed her a mirror. The bailiff opened the doors again, calling us back inside. The judge would deliver the verdict after deliberation. As we walked in, I glanced over my shoulder at the courthouse garden. Trimmed hedges, a fountain shaped like scales. Somewhere under that sound of running water, I thought I heard something quieter. The click of a chain snapping. Back in session, the judge spoke slowly. Having reviewed the financial records, audio evidence, and testimony, this court finds sufficient proof of embezzlement and fraud. Edward's lawyer rose in protest, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. Mr. Dunn, your actions show a clear pattern of coercion and deceit. You used your position to exploit a trust meant for your daughter's security. Barbara made a small sound, half gasp, half whimper. Therefore, the judge continued, Edward Dunn is sentenced to 5 years incarceration and ordered to repay $75,000 in restitution. Barbara Dunn, while complicit in concealment, will not face criminal charges at this time. However, I strongly recommend psychological counseling for both parties. The gavel struck once, final. The sound echoed down my bones. Edward turned, his eyes locking on me. For a heartbeat, I saw not fury, but disbelief that I, the quiet one, had done something irreversible. Barbara reached for him, but he shook her off as the bailiff approached, his face twisted, words dying behind clenched teeth. The cuffs clicked. Ellen exhaled beside me. Jonathan reached for my hand. The world tilted, but not from fear this time, from relief. Outside, the air felt different, cleaner, lighter. Jonathan stopped me on the steps. You did it. No, I said, we did. But in my chest, where fear used to live, there was something else now, something like ownership. I turned back to see Barbara still standing in the courthouse doorway, looking lost. For a moment, pity fluttered somewhere near my ribs. Then I remembered her words. She's too scared to look, and the pity dissolved. I walked toward the street, the sound of my heels on concrete steady as a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking home. I was walking forward. The headline hit Mansfield before the sun did. Local businessman convicted in family trust fraud. Daughter's testimony exposes years of abuse. Richard Moore's name was below it, and mine, Arden Vale, was in the first paragraph, black ink on truth. By noon, my phone was a storm. Messages from old classmates, co-workers, neighbors who used to wave from driveways. So proud of you. Can't believe what you went through. You're so brave. Brave! The word didn't sit right. Courage was something you planned. What I'd done felt more like falling in slow motion and surviving the impact. Ellen made coffee that morning and slid the newspaper across her kitchen table. You look taller, she said, eyes glinting. I didn't sleep, I admitted. Still taller. The front page photo was small but clear. Me, walking out of the courthouse, head high, Jonathan one step behind. Edward's face was blurred in the background, the moment he realized control had a boundary. Barbara wasn't pictured. She'd fled through the side exit before the cameras arrived. By evening, half the town had an opinion. People whispered at grocery aisles, at gas stations, some with sympathy, others with gossip, but all with attention, something my parents had hoarded like currency. Jonathan showed up with takeout and a bottle of cider. 2 endings, he said, raising a glass. I clinked mine softly. And beginnings. He smiled. You're free now. Free. Another word that didn't feel real yet. Freedom wasn't a door flung open. It was learning to step through without flinching. 2 days later, an unfamiliar number called. Ms. Vale? The voice was warm, businesslike. This is Donna West from the Mansfield Community Board. I'd like to speak with you about an opportunity. At her office, a modest building lined with community awards, Donna offered me tea and a seat. I read your story, she said, and I read between the lines. What happened to you, and what you did to stop it. It's not just survival, it's governance. You know how power gets misused, how trust gets broken. We need that perspective on our local trust fund committee. I blinked. You want me to, what, monitor other people's money? She smiled. Exactly. Make sure no one else gets manipulated the way you were. Think of it as repairing the system from inside. The idea settled in me like something that had been waiting for space. When would it start? As soon as you say yes. I said it before I could second-guess myself. Yes. That night, I found a letter waiting in Ellen's mailbox, my name scrawled in uneven handwriting. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Edward. Inside, the paper was creased and smudged. Arden, it began. I don't expect forgiveness, but prison gives a man time to think. I see now that I tried to build control when I should have built trust. I failed you. I hope someday you'll let me prove I've changed. The last line was almost neat. I'm proud of you, even if I have to watch from here. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it under a stack of unpaid bills on Ellen's counter. He's trying to rewrite the ending, I said softly. Ellen didn't look up from the tea she was stirring. Then don't give him the pen. A week later, Barbara called. I didn't answer, but her voicemail played in fragments. Muffled sobs, an apology, a confession wrapped in excuses. He scared me, Arden. I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry. I listened once, then I deleted it. Forgiveness might come someday, but not as a favor. It would have to be earned in silence, not begged through static. Mansfield moved on, as towns do. New scandals, new bake sales, new seasons. But the air felt different when people saw me now. Less pity, more respect. The girl who used to shrink at the grocery store aisle now nodded back without apology. One afternoon, Donna invited me to a community luncheon. They want to meet our newest advisor, she said. I almost said no. Public events still made me uneasy, but Jonathan squeezed my hand. Go, let them see what they can't erase. At the event, someone handed me a microphone. The crowd's faces blurred under warm light. My heartbeat sounded like footsteps behind me, but I spoke anyway. I lost a family, I said, but I found my voice, and once you find that, you never go silent again. Applause rippled through the hall, soft then strong, like something shared. Donna's eyes shone. Jonathan's were steady, proud. Afterward, Donna pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was a small grant approval form. "For whatever you want to build next," she said. That night, sitting at Ellen's table, I filled in the form's empty line. Project name, Haven. Purpose, support and legal aid for victims of family abuse. Jonathan helped me design the website. Ellen made calls to local donors. Richard wrote a follow-up feature titled, From Victim to Advocate, How One Woman is Rebuilding Mansfield's Sense of Trust. The story wasn't about revenge, it was about repair. 1 month later, Donna stopped by my new apartment downtown. A bright, quiet space with thrift store furniture and too much sunlight. She stood by the window, looking out at the town square. "You've given this place something it didn't know it needed," she said, "a conscience." "Maybe just a mirror," I said. Jonathan arrived with groceries, his shirt sleeves rolled up, humming under his breath. He'd become my calm, not my rescue. There was a difference. I set the paper with the Haven logo on the fridge. For the first time in my life, I was the one signing checks, not asking for permission to spend them. As the day faded, Ellen texted a photo from her porch camera, the same angle that once caught my worst nights. This one showed the three of us through my new window, me, Jonathan, and Donna, laughing mid-sentence. Her message read, "Finally something worth keeping on record." I smiled, saving the image. Maybe that was what healing really looked like, not an erasure of the past, but evidence that you survived it. The vineyard smelled like late autumn, ripe air, wood smoke, the faint sweetness of crushed grapes. I stood at the edge of the ceremony aisle, the hem of my ivory dress brushing fallen leaves. It wasn't the kind of wedding you saw in glossy magazines. It was smaller, quieter, real. Ellen adjusted my veil, her eyes shimmering. "Ready?" I smiled, more than I thought I'd ever be. She squeezed my hand once before taking her place at my side. When the music began, a simple guitar, no orchestra, the world seemed to hush. Jonathan waited under the oak archway, the evening light softening the lines of his face. His expression wasn't just love, it was recognition, the look of someone who'd seen you at your worst and still believed in your best. As I walked, I caught glimpses of the people who had built me back. Donna West in her navy suit, Richard Moore with his notebook tucked away for once, Ellen standing tall, her camera already misted with tears. A few of the women from Haven sat together, whispering encouragement. When I reached Jonathan, he took my hands. His palms were warm, steady. The officiant's voice was gentle. "Do you, Jonathan Price, take Arden Vale?" "I do," he said before she could finish, and laughter rippled through the crowd. "Impatient," I teased under my breath. He smiled. Finally something I don't have to wait for. When it was my turn, I spoke softly but clear. "I take you, not because you saved me, but because you stayed while I saved myself." A wind moved through the vines, scattering a few leaves across the aisle. The sky blushed gold as we said our vows. Simple promises about honesty, space, and choosing each other on ordinary days. When the kiss came, it wasn't cinematic. It was real, the kind that seals quiet things. Trust, forgiveness, the life you choose after survival. At the reception, fairy lights wound through the vines, their glow warm and low. Ellen gave a toast that made everyone laugh first, cry second. "To Arden," she said, lifting her glass, "who taught this town that the truth doesn't need permission." Donna followed, adding, "And to Haven, because every woman deserves a door she can walk through without fear." The applause was thundersoft. Richard sidled up afterward, grinning. "You've made my best story obsolete." "Then write a better one," I said. He chuckled, already drafting it. As the night deepened, Jonathan and I slipped away from the music, walking down the row of vines where the air smelled faintly of earth and future. "I still can't believe it," he said. "A year ago, you were..." "Terrified," I finished for him. "Now I'm just living." He brushed a loose strand of hair from my face. "And changing everything around you while you're at it." The next morning, sunlight filtered through our apartment window. Our apartment, not a borrowed room or someone else's space. The newspaper lay on the counter, another article from Richard. Haven opens first outreach office. Founder calls it a place for beginnings. I read it over coffee, still in my robe. We're official, I told Jonathan. He smiled, sliding an arm around my waist. You already were. On the fridge, the photo Ellen had sent weeks earlier was pinned with a magnet shaped like a tiny house. Under it, I'd scrawled 3 words in marker. Keep it honest. Weeks later, I sat in the New Haven office, a repurposed library downtown. The walls were painted pale blue, the shelves lined with pamphlets, notebooks, and one framed quote Donna had given me. Family isn't who raised you, it's who helps you rise. A woman sat across from me, nervous, hands clasped. A bruise peeked from under her sleeve. I don't know where to start, she whispered. I smiled softly. You just did. She exhaled, the first breath of something like relief. I handed her a pamphlet, the same one that bore my name, the one I still couldn't look at without feeling the echo of who I'd been. When she left, I locked the door and stood by the window, watching the street below. Mansfield looked smaller now, less like a cage, more like a map I'd redrawn. My phone buzzed, a number I hadn't seen in months. Barbara. I stared at it. The call rang twice, then 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. Her message came through, soft, trembling. Arden, I read about Haven. You're doing good things. I'm proud of you. No excuses this time, no pleading, just words. I saved the voicemail but didn't reply. Maybe that was forgiveness in its simplest form. Not an answer, just silence that didn't ache anymore. That night, Jonathan and I sat on the balcony. The town lights blinked steady below us, the air cool and still. He traced my hand with his thumb. What do you want next? I thought about it. Peace, I said, and maybe a dog. He laughed, head tilted back, free in a way we both hadn't been before. The stars were out, small, sharp, ordinary miracles. In the quiet, I realized freedom wasn't loud. It didn't need to prove itself. It just stayed, steady as breath. And for the first time since that slap across a dinner table, I believed I'd keep it.